with then the Korean driver Chaewon Lim finishing second, and the South African again run with Team Westech Liam Venter, who completed the rostrum. The race is scheduled to be over 35 minutes of duration in terms of the time that we had yesterday, or alternatively it will be over 14 laps, provided there are no safety car interventions and the like. So the drivers at the moment working their way along the Mistral Straight, just weaving around, warming up, getting a little bit of heat into their tyres. It's Paul Ricard circuit, very much state-of-the-art facility. It's a high-tech test track, and it's a circuit as well that these drivers will have visited through the winter, both for testing and also the Winter Series races, which were to an extent dominated by Team Westech. So Nelson Mason leading the Blue Armada here at the front of the field. And then the first non-Westech car is Santiago Urrutia, the Uruguayan driver, who lines up in fourth on the grid for RP Motorsport, last year's champion team with Nicolo Schiro. Well, joining me for the race today, as he did yesterday, is the team principal of Team Westech, John Miller. And John, you're grinning like a Cheshire cat at the moment, and with perfectly good reason. Qualifying went well.
Well, I'm grinning like a Cheshire cat because qualifying did go well, but I've also just run up quite a lot of stairs. And I think we've got a mix of cars on the grid, some on slicks, some on wets. So who knows what's going to happen.
And what did the drivers feed back to you on the sighting lap about the track conditions? For our commentary box, it looks dry, but there's just so much moisture and humidity in the air.
Well, I think our three drivers who are first, second and third on the grid, I think they're all still on wets. They're happy with that. I think maybe some of the drivers lower down gambling a little on the slicks. In the GT race we just watched, at the end the Aston Martin was the quickest car on the track on the slicks, but those are cars with twice as much power and twice as much weight as our car, and I think that looks like Hurst, who was just off the circuit on the parade lap, and I believe he has gambled on slicks.
Well, let's see whether or not that gamble pays off. The key though, if you take that gamble of slick tyres at the start, as they come round to the start-finish line, you should definitely see the wets there on Nelson Mason's car, as the wets will give you the grip in the early stages, and if you're on slicks, you've just got to be patient. You've not got to be a hero and try and win the race at the first corner. It's really about staying out of trouble for the first couple of corners, and then with about going into the last stage of the race, if the track dries out, that's when the slick tyres come to the fore, as we see the Campos Racing car of the Polish driver, the Janos, heading to his spot on the grid. Artur Janos down in 30th position, so unfortunately Artur has got a reasonable amount of work to do from there. So the last couple of cars coming into position, the Campos Racing team watching anxiously. 14 laps or 35 minutes await us. Yesterday was a rolling start. Today we're going to have the standing start. What a magnificent sight these cars make as they line up almost as far as the eye can see out to the final turn here. Paul Ricard, when will we get the green flag from the marshal at the rear of the pack? We do now, so the drivers will be given the 5-second board. It will then be eyes to the gantry as the red lights will come on. Then we'll go racing for the second time this weekend at Paul Ricard. And away we go.
It looks like another parade lap.
It does look like another parade lap. Yes, they've been given another green flag lap there. Reasons why, we know not. It was either that or the finest team synchronised jump start of all time, but it now looks like it is another parade lap. And I can only presume, John, that this is because of the fact the track conditions are substantially different to the ones that they qualified in this morning.
Possibly, Ben, possibly, but when we do that, we shouldn't actually come around to start from the grid unless they're maybe thinking about some sort of safety car start, but I would have thought it's dry enough to have a proper start.
The only other factor is you briefly mentioned that Hector Hurst ran off the road. There was a gap on the grid in the midfield, and it could be that somebody, one of the drivers, as you said, who may have taken that gamble with slick tyres, has an altercation with a barrier on that formation lap. And sometimes if a car goes off on the formation lap, then that is enough to prompt a second sighting lap. Anyway, for the drivers, they're on their way, and actually the race clock has begun as well. So they're getting this second formation lap. The race clock is beginning to tick down.
Well, who knows, Ben? Who knows? It's possible, and if one of the cars is stranded on track, they should go with the second parade lap. And the camera did show Hector's engineer David Scott talking into the radio, so maybe that does give us a clue.
So it's the 3 Westech cars, all blue, then at Heatherfield, and they are followed on the grid by the 2 RP Motorsport runners. Santiago Urrutia, who, if you watched yesterday's race, you'll have seen Urrutia limping into retirement at the final lap with his suspension somewhat rearranged and his nose cone missing. And that was actually, it wasn't a collision with another car, but he had a spin coming onto the Mistral straight, went into the Armco barrier. That's what did the damage, and he tried to limp round to the finish nonetheless. There is the Emilio de Vallota Motorsport team. Rueful shake of the head, and I suspect that Hector Hurst may well have disappeared somewhere out on the track.
I believe he was on the grid on slicks, so yeah, that's a possibility.
Well, as one commentator once said about another Hurst, they think it's all over. It is now. Is that the case? Possibly for Hector Hurst with regards to today's race. We'll see the Campos Racing team all out in the pit lane. I think the teams have maybe been caught on the hoof a little bit here by this extra formation lap. But they're not being led around by a safety car though either. So, and that the race clock has reset back to 35 minutes. So
I guess I think probably we will have a car somewhere on track that was being recovered or put into a safe place, so they should go around again, and now they'll knock 1 lap off the race distance.
And for the drivers, when you're keyed up, the adrenaline's pumping, the last thing you want is another formation lap. You just want to get the race underway at this stage.
Yes, I guess so. You know, we've been waiting since qualifying. Qualifying clearly was exceptionally good for our team. A bit of a red letter day so far, so they're all ready to go. But as I said yesterday, they're all professionals and they know what's required of them. I've got plenty of confidence in the guys.
Could cost you an absolute fortune in chocolate again, because the tradition in Team Westech is that when they win a race, that John springs for a large bar of chocolate for each team member. So, except supermarkets locally here are closed on a Sunday, so we'll have to wait for duty free at the airport tonight. Anyway, the cars coming back to the grid. In terms of identifying then amongst that top 3, well, Nelson Mason, he is in the predominantly blue helmet. Spencer Piggott, his helmet's a little bit like Mark Webber's when it was in Formula 3 with the fluorescent yellow on top, and then Roberto LaRocca is a largely green. And we're looking at a couple of cars at the back of the grid. That's Saud Al Faisal, the former Saudi Arabian Radical champion, who moves across into the European F3 Open this year. He is about to take his position on the grid. Then it will be Arturo Janos and finally Richard Gonda, who only did a couple of laps in qualifying. But I think we can expect to see Gonda coming up through the field very rapidly, because the Slovakian driver went very, very well on his sole appearance in the FIA Formula 2 Championship last year. The teams all poised in the pit lane. We are about to get the green flag once more at the rear of the pack, and the gap that was on the grid seems to have miraculously plugged itself, so everybody seems to be all present and correct. The red lights are on, and this time we're going to go racing, and away we go. It's a super start from Spencer Piggott, a terrible getaway alternatively from Nelson Mason. Also well away is Santiago Urrutia in the first of the RP Motorsport cars, but it's Spencer Piggott who is leading as contact between Urrutia and one of the Westech cars. I think it's the Pulsar Nelson Mason who goes off. They clatter into the concrete barrier, and fortunately they both went in sideways, so it is leading the way. Spencer Piggott second place is Roberto LaRocca. It's Sandy Stuvik who's come up into third position. They're all cleanly through the first turn, and Piggott, who only did a little bit of testing at Pembrey and then ran on Friday prior to getting it racing this weekend, is leading the way as a couple of them run a little bit wide through turn 3. But of course, with the tyre factor here, the front runners in this early stage of the race may not be the drivers that we'll be looking to in the latter stages. The midfield, plenty of jostling for position going on, seesawing at the wheel. I think the grip is maybe all that the drivers would hope that it could be, but it is Spencer Piggott who leads them onto the Mistral straight for the first time. Roberto LaRocca is in second position. Up into third is Sandy Stuvik, and is that Vicky Piria who's in fourth? It is. Alexandros Kugno completes the top 5, but he's under real pressure from Alexander Toril, who is looking jinked inside.
Stuvik up to second.
He is, but he very nearly loses it, as he is a little bit too enthusiastic and optimistic with the right foot, accelerating through turn 8. Lively start to this race. And Lorenzo Paggi, by the way, leading the Copper class with Liam Venter snapping at his heels. Right, let's unpick the start here. Too many cars into too little space is what it looks like from this angle. We really need to see it from behind or sideways to apportion blame.
Yeah, there was some ducking and diving there. It looked like LaRocca moved across as well, so I'm not sure.
I think the difficulty there was that Urrutia made a superb getaway and that Nelson Mason was slow off the marks, and that really just caused the pack to concertina up on each other. And with these open wheel cars with the wheels and suspension exposed to the side, interlocking wheels, which is what we had then, and then the incident is unfortunately all too easy to happen as Mario Marasca looks to elevate himself on through the pack. Now, are those some drops of precipitation that we're getting on the camera there as they head towards the end of the first lap? There is Marasca in the orange and white car. He is onto the tail of one of the Campos racing cars. I suspect it's probably Denis Nagulin, the Russian driver, back for his second year in the European F3 Open. So through they come. Spencer Pigot leads it. Sandy Stuvik in second, but the Thai driver is closing in very quickly onto his tail. Then we've got Roberto LaRocca in third. He's got the former GP3 racer Vicky Piria behind him, and Alexandra Kugno, Alexandra Toril, pair of them. If you cast your mind back to the Hungaroring last year, had a fairly sizable incident when they were battling with Lorenzo Paggi leading the Copper class by just 1.8 seconds from Liam Venter. But look at this, the challenge for third, and launching to the inside is Vicky Piria. Roberto LaRocca left the door ajar. Eventually he closes it, but Piria is looking a lot feistier than she did yesterday.
Yes, I'm trying to look what tyres she's got on her car. Are they wet?
Can't quite see from this angle. Certainly Roberto LaRocca having to consult his wing mirrors rather more than he'd like in these early stages of the race. The race duration, by the way, has been reduced by 1 lap. It's going to be a 13-lap race. And Spencer Pigot has got Sandy Stuvik right in his slipstream as well. Just looking to see Stuvik's running a little bit of a lower rear wing, isn't he, in terms of the slipstreaming potential that affords him. He can't quite make the move on the brakes into turn 8, so it's Pigot who prevails in the lead. Stuvik second. Then we've got Roberto LaRocca in third. He is being chased down by Vicky Piria with Alexandra Kugno and Alexandra Toril closing right up onto that fight for third position. And this, John, has got all the makings of being a classic Formula 3 slipstreamer.
Yes, it definitely looks like the RP car's got less wing than us, so they'll have taken a bit of a flyer there, and at the moment it looks quite promising, but we'll have to see what that does to his tyres.
Particularly if they're on wet tyres, because he might just be over-exerting himself on those wet tyres earlier on. And certainly RP Motorsport, they've gone maybe for a compromise setup, low downforce wet tyres, because Alexandra Kugno and Alexandra Toril also under the RP Motorsport banner going strongly. Battle for the lead though, very, very tight as they jink through the third and final sector of the lap. Out of turn 12 they come on towards turn 13 through the sweepers, where there is possibly a little bit of a shower just beginning as Stuvik launches a move to the inside of Spencer Pigot. They go side by side through turn 14. It's going to be a drag race, and fortunately for Pigot, he gets his nose in front. There's still yellow flags here due to the ongoing recovery of Urrutia and Mason's cars. So through we go, 2 laps complete, 11 to go, and Stuvik again fancies his chances, jinking all over the tail of Spencer Pigot. Pigot, though, who's raced in US Formula Ford 2000 and actually Formula Ford 600 in the UK, knows a thing or two about racecraft, and for now he keeps the Thai driver behind him.
Yes, clearly Stuvik's looking very racy there, and we'll have to see. Yesterday we saw some cars that were very quick at the beginning of the race and seemed to be slower towards the end, so that could be wearing their tyres out through lower aero. So it's quite exciting, who knows.
Sandy Stuvik, who finished 14th in last year's Formula Renault 2-litre North European Championship, is right up on his tail as we have a look at further adventures behind. And that is the 66 car of Cameron Twynham that goes around as he was busy being passed by one of the Corbetta Competizione cars. Twynham, who was victorious in the Copper class yesterday, not looking likely to do the double again today. As we go side by side for the lead, and Stuvik trying to work his way around outside of Spencer Pigot, and he does so well in advance of the braking zone for turn 8, but then pitches the RP Motorsport car sideways. A pair of them sprint out of turn 9 onto the second half of the Mistral Straight. One of the Corbetta cars is rather headed through the cut through, and
Piria's
also
past LaRocca.
Yeah, Vicky Piria has worked way past Roberto LaRocca as well. But the tyres here could be a big factor, particularly if we end up in a situation where half of the track has got a little bit of a shower and the other half maybe doesn't, because it's a long, thin facility here at Paul Ricard, and it's eminently possible you can have a shower at one end of the track but be completely dry, particularly through the opening section. Roberto LaRocca already coming under a little bit of pressure from the Frenchman. Alexandra Kugno, multiple podium finisher last year in the Copper class, the top F3 team. He moves across to RP Motorsport and is looking to launch a challenge on the Venezuelan. Thinks about leaping to the inside. What Kugno's going to be mindful of here as well is his teammate Alexander Toril, and then they've got Lorenzo Paggi, the Copper class leader as well, right on their tail. So through we go, And Sandy Stuvik has taken the lead on that lap and leads it by 1.9 seconds as they come through, with already Vicky Piria just 1.6 seconds back from Spencer Piggott, and then Roberto La Rocca in fourth under pressure from Cugno, who in turn is being pressurised by Toril.
Yes, Stuvik has pulled out a good lead there straight away, so good driving from him.
And really, he just needs to make sure he runs at a pace he's comfortable with, because if they are worried about maybe tyre wear late in the race, then Stuvik will want to build as big an advantage as possibly can early on. Alexandra Cugno looking a little bit ragged. He seems to be quicker than Roberto La Rocca, but he made a mistake then, and into turn 5, Alexander Toril says thank you very much. The drive with the orange helmet, Toril goes through, demotes the Frenchman Alexandra Cugno, as we've got just behind a fantastic battle coming together for the lead of the Copper class, as Liam Venter, the South African driver, is right onto the tail of Lorenzo Paggi. There you go, at the very back of your screen, the bright yellow car and the blue machine just behind. So we have got battling going on throughout the field as well, and let's see whether or not Liam Venter is in a position to challenge Paggi on this occasion. They've also got Yarin Stern in the Emilio de Vallota motorsport car on their tail, and it could be Stern looking to make the move on Venter. They all hit the brakes into turn 8, and yes, through goes Yarin Stern, but Liam Venter, South African, he will be very pleased to be in contact with Paggi early on in this race, as La Rocca slow again onto the Mistral straight, brings Toril up onto his tail, and we could well soon see 6 cars squabbling here over fourth.
Yes, pretty exciting stuff. Liam had a good race yesterday. He actually spun on the first racing lap and managed to come up and finish third, only a couple of seconds behind one of his teammates, Cameron, who was able to take the Copper win. So he's definitely racy, and he's got the skill and he's got the car.
As Roberto La Rocca leaves the door again ajar for Alexandra Toril, then snaps across, closing that gap that had briefly appeared, fortunately without the detachment of a nose cone. Vicky Piria in pursuit of Spencer Piggott, but at the moment that gap looking pretty much as it was. Definitely a few spots of rain beginning to appear as well on our camera lens, and that could see fortunes fluctuating as Lorenzo Paggi now fancies his chances and lead the Copper class on the tail of Alexandra Cugno. So through they come, 4 laps complete, 9 remain. There's Yarin Stern. Mostly Sandy Stuvik is through. Vicky Piria on that lap 6/10 second quicker than Spence Piggott in second. In fourth, Roberto La Rocca under pressure for Alexander Toril, as Yarin Stern jumps the inside of Lorenzo Paggi, the Israeli driver, looking to get onto terms with the fight for the race overall. The battle for fourth position, and Roberto La Rocca showing just how wide the Dallara F312 can be when you really need it to be. And so the Venezuelan, robust defence here from Alexander Toril. Turn 5 is where Toril made his move on Cugno last time through, and he does exactly the same to Roberto La Rocca. Lightning quick change of direction there from Toril to find the gap to the inside line. He pushes La Rocca out wide, who's only just in time able to cover the line and keep Cugno behind him. See it from another angle. We didn't see the start of the move there. That was beautifully judged driving from Alexander Toril. He climbs up into fourth position.
It's a good opportunistic move from Toril. It didn't seem to leave a lot of room on the exit, but opportunist nonetheless.
And now La Rocca has lost out as well to Cugno and Yarin Stern. He's got Lorenzo Paggi on his tail, and also Liam Venter, his teammate from Westtech. So Roberto La Rocca dropping back through the
Liam's
field.
right with Paggi now.
He is. So we're focusing on the fight for fourth position, which is a slipstreaming train into Corpus C. But look at, we just panned the camera away, but around the outside, the Inventor was trying to take the lead of the Copper class. We'll find out in due course whether or not that was successful.
He's done it.
He's through. That's an absolutely astonishing move from Liam Venter. Lorenzo Paggi, though, looks to fight back to the inside line at turn 11. But Venter, if he can keep his nose to the inside line as they arrive into turn 12, could still yet take the class lead away from Lorenzo Paggi. Paggi, though, does enough to close the door in time, and they are certainly enjoying themselves there. No quarter asked and none given.
No, good racing from the two guys. Good racing now.
And they're also, what they've got to worry about here, though, is that Nicholas Pola, the German driver running with DAV Racing, is homing in very rapidly onto their tail as well. So there is Pola, the DAV Racing car. So we now got the 3 cars fighting for the Copper class, as side by side the Inventor being squeezed the edge of the circuit by Lorenzo Paggi. He doesn't really give him a car's width there, and the Inventor finally able to not quite draw alongside. He's thinking about the move on the brakes here. He then looks to the outside of Lorenzo Paggi. And that was stout defence from Paggi, as we definitely do have a little bit of a shower beginning to come down here at Paul Ricard, with their Nicholas Pola closing right up on to their tail. Leads the race, though, it's Sandy Stuvik who still leads by 5 seconds from Spencer Pigot, who's now got Vicky Piria right on his tail. Alexander Toril is in 4th, Alexandra Kugno 5th, Yaron Stern 6th, Roberto LaRocca 7th. No, make that Yaron Stern in 5th. Through he goes, launches the inside of Alexandra Kugno. And this is the finest we've seen the Israeli driver performing in the European F3 Open. Really impressive stuff from Yaron Stern. There is the fight for second position at the front of your shot. The blue car of Spencer Pigot with Vicky Piria just on his tail. Piria ducks out of the slipstream, can't quite make the move. Further back, there's all sorts of jinking and jostling for position. And we're only on the 6th lap of the race. We're not yet a half race distance. And yes, no,
LaRocca.
Oh, contact! Roberto LaRocca turns across the front of Lorenzo Paggi, and we'd seen that LaRocca had been keen of that late chop earlier in the race, and unfortunately it's LaRocca who gets turned round. It benefits his teammate Liam Venter, who poaches the lead of the Copper class as a result, and has Paggi picked up damage there? Not quite. Yes, he has.
Backwards.
Yeah, Lorenzo Paggi, his car doesn't seem to be entirely stable under high-speed cornering, so it's Liam Ventry now leads the Copper class. Second place is Nicholas Pola. Lorenzo Paggi dropping back through. It's going to promote the Spanish driver Igor Urian, is also running wide.
Marasca.
Yeah, Mario Marasca, who joins just on the tail of Matteo Vita, and the pair of them had lots of fun yesterday as they all try and negotiate the ailing car of Lorenzo Paggi. And John is going to have to depart us because he's been summoned to race control. I think we can probably guess what that was for. And thank you very much to John Miller from West Tech, as Vicky Piria has a super run on Spencer Pigot as they come through and complete the 6th lap of the race. Pigot to the inside line. Vicky Piria looks to the outside, and is it Piria who's going to go through? No, Pigot incredibly late on the brakes. Again, maintaining that second position. Super scrap between the pair of them. But what they've got to be mindful of here is that as they slow each other down, it is enabling both Alexander Toril in the RP Motorsport car, the grey and orange car, just to back your shot with the orange helmet, and also Yaron Stern in the black Emilio De Villota Motorsport car, Toman on the tail of the scrap for second as Pigot runs wide, then has to take a very defensive line from Piria into turn 5. Vicky Piria's got to be careful here not to maybe snag her nose into the rear tyre of Spencer Pigot. Right, here is the incident between Paggi and LaRocca once more. Roberto LaRocca pitched into a spin and most likely retirement, and Lorenzo Paggi also out of the race. He's got this 4-car train, still disputing second position. All the while, Sandy Stuvik leads comfortably, and Vicky Piria thinks about swooping around the outside of Spencer Pigot, who brakes very late, but he can't withstand the challenge of Vicky Piria, so through she goes and takes second place away from the American Spencer Pigot. Alexander Toril and Yaron Stern still in that order and still in pursuit. So now that Piria is second, she will set about trying to pull clear of Pigot, who is going to have his work out here, I think, to maintain third place in the race overall. Liam Venter and Nicholas Pola having a very good scrap still for the Copper classes. Piria runs wide into turn 11, then swoops across. Spencer Pigot takes the tight entry, then slithers a little bit wider. That brings Toril and Stern right up onto his tail. And it's almost 3 wide into turn 12, and having to do a very robust defensive drive there is Spencer Pigot, which he succeeds in so doing in the blue car, but he's got right up onto his tail. Now Toril and Stern. Running wide is Pigot, who is really having to fight that car at the very limit of adhesion to maintain his place on the rostrum. Toril looks to the outside, Stern to the inside, they squirt through. Complete the 7th lap of the race, just 6 remaining, and I'll be surprised if Spencer Pigot is in third by the time they arrive into turn 1. Toril right on the tail of Pigot as they flash through, almost bump drafting him down in towards turn 1, but Pigot is holding his nerve here. They're going to be 3 wide, but it's Yaron Stern who takes third position. Toril swoops for 4th, and Spencer Pigot, as a result, slips down into 5th position. So disappointing for him. But it's Yaron Stern who's the driver to watch here. The Israeli really having a turn of pace, and his driver is running at the same pace as leads Alexandra Kugno. Meanwhile, has been caught by the Copper class leader Liam Venter, and Venter has got Pola on his tail. It's a big gap back then to the 3rd place car in the Copper class, which is Igor Urian, although Urian is being caught by Richard Gonda, the Slovakian, who we thought would go well from the back of the grid, is doing exactly that. The way things are going, this race is going to be running to laps rather than time, which is good to see. Vicky Piria is under real pressure already from Yarin Stern, and Stern, the Emilio Veloce Motorsport driver, is looking to go around the outside of Piria, which he does as he arrives into turn 8 on the brakes. Will he be able to fight his way to the inside line for turn 9? No, he's not. So Piria able to prevail. There is the fight for the Copper Class lead. The blue car for the Inventor just ahead of the black machine of Nicholas Pola, the German driver who has graduated on from the ADAC Formal Master Championship from last year, as Stern dives to the inside of Vicky Piria into the Corbe du Scene. Up into second position then goes Yarin Stern, and Piria is about to be demoted, possibly off the rostrum, because Alexander Toril fancied a move to the inside line into turn 11. Piria just able to cover the line in time. They then sprint towards turn 12, coming towards the end of the 8th lap of the race. I've only got about a third of the race remaining. And the big question is, what can Yarin Stern, if anything, do about Sandy Stuvik? Because at the moment, Stuvik is pretty much the fastest man on the track, as Piria slithers out wide again into turn 13. We seem to, with each time they head around the circuit, have a few more drops of rain on the camera. Just looking from the contrabox window to see the rain's coming down. If it is, it's a very fine drizzle, but it's certainly making it slippery and greasy for the driver. So there's Sandy Stuvik, that's his advantage. But Stuvik had a poor lap last time round to 2 minutes 21. It means his advantage, Yarin Stern, has been decreased by about a third. It's only 6.3 seconds at the moment. And also coming to the fore now are the Campos racing cars of Valerio Carballo and Denis Nagulin. Both of them back in the European F3 Open after mixed campaigns last year, and it's Carballo, the first of those drivers, who has picked her way past Nicholas Pola. Denis Nagulin, who last year, if it wasn't for bad luck, he'd have had no luck at all. He seemed to be the spare parts truck's best customer, but he's obviously learned well over the winter. He's benefiting from staying with the Campos racing team, the tutelage of Adrian Campos, because he is really putting together probably his finest drive in the European F3 Open this afternoon. As he closes up on Nicholas Pola, all of which is very good news for the Inventor. So we have a spin lower down the order. That is the number 21 car, Saud Al Faisal, for RP Motorsport from the back of the grid, and remaining there, RP Motorsport, their reigning champion Nicolo Schiro watching on. We've got a yellow flag, turn 1, which could possibly be instant for Al Faisal. Now, what is going on between Stuvik and Yarin Stern? Yarin Stern was 2 seconds quicker than Stuvik through the first sector. He's half a second quicker through sector 2. So Yarin Stern may just snatch the victory here. He's got 5 laps to play with, but he is rapidly encroaching on Sandy Stuvik's advantage. He continues to close by the margin that he is, as Denis Nagulin surges around the outside of Nicholas Pola as they pick their way through the Corbe du Scene. Valerio Carballo looking to do exactly the same thing to the Inventor, as sliding off goes Carballo, who slithers wide, recovers admirably, but unfortunately she's lost a fair degree of ground. She rejoins just on the tail of Matteo Vita, who has been steadily picking his way up through the order. And the track, again, looking increasingly greasy by those drivers who are prepared to take the risks, benefiting. Here we see it again, and yes, and Carballo just dropping her rear left tyre onto the blue paint, pitching the car sideways. And she recovers, actually, without having lost too much time. So over the line, 4 laps to go, and Sandy Stuvik's lead over Yarin Stern is down to 3 seconds, and again Stern was 3 seconds faster last time around than Sandy Stuvik, so Yarin Stern could well race himself into the mix here. Vicky Piria still in 3rd for Alexander Toril, and then in 5th Spencer Piggott. He's got Alexander Kugna on his tail in 6th, and then the Copper Class leader, the Inventor, who is standing the challenge of Denis Nagulin. As Nagulin goes sideways, he gets the car onto the curb, slews luridly, keeps his right foot pretty much firmly planted on the loud pedal. Although that does mean that Nicholas Pola can possibly think about maybe challenging into turn 3. German, though, not quite able to find a way past the Russian, so they remain as they were. So we move towards the latter stages of this race, and we do have a fine rain just beginning to fall here. Poor Ricard. Vicky Piria has suddenly upped her pace substantially, and Piria was 3 seconds quicker than Yarin Stern and Sandy Stuvik through the first sector. So we're seeing the leading trio all coming together. So it's leading the way. Sandy Stuvik, the tie driver, second place, the Israeli. Yarin Stern, that's the all-black car. And then Vicky Piria, she is in the white and orange machine as they head on to the second half of the Mistral Straight. And Stern is quicker than Stuvik, and Piria is quicker than both of them as they arrive into the Courbe du Cygne. And in particular, it's Piria who is particularly strong. I think this stage of the race through the twistier sections of the circuit. And again, as we were hearing from John Miller earlier on, this could well be a factor relating to maybe some of the setup choices the teams have made, with Stuvik in particular going for a low downforce setup. John Miller questioned whether or not that was going to have an adverse effect on the tyres late in the race, and now the cars started with maybe a slightly higher downforce or an interim setup are really coming to the good here. We're on lap 10 of 13, second race of the year from the European F3 Open, and still a three-way fight ahead of the field. It's number one, Sandy Stuvik, who leads it, but he has got Yarin Stern for Emilio Development Motorsport right on his tail, and then Vicky Piria closing up on to the pair of them. So the gap between the top three last time through was 6 seconds. The gap this time is 3.3 seconds, with Piria being a second faster than Yarin Stern, and Stern being 2 seconds to the good of Sandy Stuvik. The inventor continues to lead the Copper class, but he's got Nicholas Perler right on his tail. The other driver who's coming very good in these late stages of the race is the Campos Racing car of Denis Nagulin. That's the all-white number 7 car, the driver with the black helmet, the former Russian touring car racer. And Nagulin could well fancy his chances of 5th position here. That's currently held by Spencer Piggott in the blue Team Westech car. Then we've got Alexandra Cugno for RP Motorsport, the grey and black and orange car, in 6th position. And then Denis Nagulin trying to elevate himself on from there. I think the podium positions, though, are thereafter out of reach. Potentially even Alexander Toril, who's been able to craft himself at a slightly lonely 4th position, which actually, given the way this weather is turning, is probably exactly what he'd want. There's also several seconds up the road. It's a little bit lower down the order. One of the Westech cars, 66, so Cameron Twynham. And was that going a lap down to Sandy Stuvik? It was. There's Yarin Stern, and then Vicky Piria has suddenly dropped back again. Sandy Stuvik, having had Yarin Stern latching himself up onto his tail, seems to have dropped back. Cameron Twynham having a fairly wretched race. So he is a long way down. We've got an incident between cars 2, Santiago Ureta, and 12, Nelson Mason. That's going to be investigated after the race, the start line incident. But what about the battle for the lead? There is still time for Yarin Stern to do this, as he's as close now to the tail of Sandy Stuvik as he has been at any point in proceedings. A pair of them been able to pull a long way clear of Vicky Piria on this lap. I don't know whether or not Piria made a mistake, because she was 2 seconds slower than her rivals, rather, through the second sector. They're going to have just 2 more laps to go at the end of this one. There is the Emilio Development Motorsport camp on their pit wall, as sliding his car is Sandy Stuvik. A little bit more stable and smooth through the final turn. It's Yarin Stern. A pair of them sprint through over the start and finish line. Just 2 laps to go. Now, at what point will the Israeli make his move? He's within half a second of Sandy Stuvik. Is it a case of trying to pressurise Stuvik into making an error, or will he look to try and pounce, then pull away? Through the first 2 turns they go, and Yarin Stern getting ever closer to the tail of Sandy Stuvik. Turn 3 is a potential overtaking opportunity if Stuvik is able to launch up the inside. He can't quite do it. Rather, Stern launch up the inside line. He can't quite do it. So the pair of them, first and second, head through turn 4 on towards turn 5. And Yarin Stern right onto the tail of Sandy Stuvik, and you can see that parts of the circuit, maybe where there's been just a little bit of moisture, is where the Emilio Development Motorsport car is at its strongest. But now he's going to be firmly in the slipstream behind Sandy Stuvik as they head on to the Mistral Straight. The braking zone into turn 8, we've seen, has been a very popular overtaking opportunity throughout the course of the day. And Stern took 0.3 of a second out of Stuvik the first section of the lap. It means he's just 0.2 behind him as he pops out of the bubble in the slipstream, but he can't quite do it. Although he's able to brake much deeper into the corner, and Will he be able to pick his way through? There is Vicky Periot, who puts the lap on Cameron Twynham. Got a guest again on the stick microphone. On to the Mistral Straight, second part of it, and again Yaron Stern ducks out of the slipstream, challenges Sandy Stuvik. We've been rejoined by John Miller from Westec, and what a finish to the race we've got.
Pit lane, Ben, and it is raining, not hard, but it is raining.
And while we were discussing in the very early stage of the race whether or not that low downforce setup, if the rain came back in, would really hurt the RP Motorsport cars, given the excessive tyre wear. And now Yaron Stern on the tail of Sandy Stuvik as he tries to push Stern wide into a mistake. And the key here is just staying off those white lines, staying off the blue paint, keeping it on the asphalt, because that's where they'll find the grip. At the moment, Sandy Stuvik able to withstand the challenge from Yaron Stern. And really, I think this will come down possibly to Stern's confidence here. He's quicker than Sandy Stuvik. It's whether or not, as they head into the final lap of the race, he's prepared to take a little bit of a gamble and launch a move up the inside.
He certainly looks like he's got a much quicker car under him. I suppose it depends how much he wants to gamble. But really, you would think, you know, his car looks to me like a good couple of seconds quicker. He should be able to find a way past, but he's done a stunning job to get as high as he has.
Yaron Stern, we weren't even discussing him in the potential pre-race favourites. He qualified in 10th position, the highest of the Emilio Di Villotto Motorsport runners, but he runs wide coming out of turn 2, just slews the rear of the car, running out over the curves. Mateo Vita dives to the inside and then spins around, and Dennis Nagulin just avoids him. He's trying to make the move on Nicholas Pola, didn't work. And has Vita found first gear? Maybe not. And it's now definitely raining out on the far side of the circuit. Look at that, this track very greasy. And this surely is Yaron Stern's opportunity to set up for a run onto the Mistral Straight. Sandy Stuvik, he's having fun there. He's just sliding the RP Motorsport car. And they've also got maybe a little bit of traffic to contend with as well. So in the slipstream is the black Emilio Di Villotto Motorsport car behind the RP Motorsport car of Sandy Stuvik. Stuvik, see, just looking into his mirrors, trying to position where Stern is, and Stern ducks out of the
You can't come from that far back.
Well, you can, but it will probably result in a visit to the race stewards, and so Yaron Stern thinks better of it. But he's now running out of corners here, and he's also just looking a little bit ragged, maybe, but the traffic is the issue, and the first traffic they're coming up to is an Emilio Di Villotto Motorsport car as well, who does the Chaewon Lim, the Korean driver who does the fair thing, moves aside, and it's actually helped Sandy Stuvik an awful lot more than it's helped Yaron Stern, who was just that little bit more tentative through the traffic. It's now going to be a case of whether or not we see an error being made by Stuvik, because Stern has dropped back in this final lap, and Stuvik makes the error trying to lap the Campos racing car, and that suddenly brings Yaron Stern right into the mix, and the gap comes down to just a car's length with 3 corners remaining. Now, has that flustered Sandy Stuvik, or will he be able to regather his thoughts?
If Stern has a chance, he's going to be up the inside into the final corner. It looks to me like Stuvik's tyres are finished, but from here, surely he can get it home.
And Sandy Stuvik, with hindsight, will feel he's managed this race perfectly, but he gets precariously close to the blue paint on the exit turn 13, but he's into the final corner, and it looks like it's going to be a maiden victory in the European F3 Open for Sandy Stuvik. He squirts out. The RP Motorsport team are celebrating on the pit wall, and it's a victory for Sandy Stuvik. Yaron Stern in second position, and then third place is going to go to Vicky Periot. But what about the copper class? It was Liam Venter who was leading it going into the final lap by just a third of a second over Nicholas Pola. And there is Liam Venter. Is he over the line? And
yes, get in there, Liam.
He has. Liam Venter has claimed victory in the copper class from Pola. So celebrations in an increasingly damp pit lane. The rain has really hit on the late stage of the race, and you just wonder if it had gone that full 14-lap duration, whether or not the outcome would have been different. As it is, it's victory for Sandy Stuvik, with Yaron Stern in second place, Vicky Periot in third. In the copper class, Liam Venter taking the win from Nicholas Pola, and then Richard Gonda from the very back of the grid did do enough to come through and win the copper class, with Wan Zhu from China finishing fourth and Igor Yurian fifth.
Yes, good job from Gonda there, from the very back of the grid after, I think, stopping at the beginning of qualifying. And Wan Zhu, Chinese driver, taking his first points in fourth place, which is fantastic. So it was a very late deal. Right,
the team managers, though, from RP Motorsport, Campos Racing, and twice over from Team Westec, have been summoned to the stewards, probably just to sample the biscuit selection, I'd imagine. But it has been one of those races, incredibly dramatic, and actually, given the wet, dry, variable conditions, to have had as few incidents as we've had, I think is really testimony probably to the quality of the field in the European F3 Open this year.
Yes, well, I've already been to the stewards during the course of the race, of course, and I'm pretty confident I know what we're going to be talking about. And I think the whole race, unfortunately, was defined at the start, and I think we'll probably be talking about that for a few hours.
Yeah, it'd be very interesting to maybe see if any of the cars have got cameras on what that looked like from other perspectives. So the rain arrives emphatically here at Paul Ricard. Well, we don't have to wait too long for the next rounds of the European F3 Open, because in a fortnight's time we're on the Algarve and the Portimao circuit. That is followed at the start of June by a trip to the Nürburgring, and then we go to Jerez at the end of June for visits to Silverstone, Spa, Monza, and the season finishing at Barcelona in the second weekend of November. So let's take a look at the classification then for the second of the 16 races this year, with victory for Sandy Stuvik, second place for Yarin Stern, third place Vicky Piria, fourth Alexander Toril, Spencer Pigot doing superbly to hold on to fifth, Dennis Nagulin, his best result by some way in the European F3 Open, for sixth. In the Copper class, Liam Venter finished eighth in the race overall and claimed it from Nicholas Pola, with then Richard Gonda completing the Copper class podium in 13th position. Valeria Carballo setting the fastest lap of the race in her charge in the Campos racing car. Luca Orlandi racing as well, way up the order well to finish in 16th position. Quite a few of them being lapped. Hector Hurst absolutely nowhere, 22nd place in the end for yesterday's runner-up, and also Alexei Chuklin, the Russian driver. He was hoping for a bit more from today. Emilio Velotta's cars clearly having some issues, because some of their front runners finishing well down in the early 20s. A couple of retirements, of course. Lorenzo Paggi, one of them, the early start in the Copper class. So what does that mean for the Drivers' Championship in the early stage of the season? Sandy Stuvik leads the way as we leave Paul Ricard, with Nelson Mason 10 points back. Alexander Toril in third, Yarin Stern and Hector Hurst share the points in fourth and fifth. Very, very tight. Of course, 14 races to come. And of the drivers emerging now, John, as the front runners in the championship, Sandy Stuvik is the only driver this weekend who's really put together two solid races.
Yes, I think one of my drivers, Mason, has been pretty emphatically impressive as well. And it looked to me like he made a pretty poor start to that race, and then probably got caught up in somebody else's incident, which is unfortunate, but he should have made a better start. We're missing Ed Jones this weekend. He'll be back in 2 weeks in Portimao. He'll be quick. But Stuvik, hats off to him. He's done a good job there. He's done a very good job. It was very impressive at the beginning of the race. Was hanging on a bit. Stern also, very, very good job from 10th on the grid.
And I think that this is the kind of race which explains why Formula 3 is the University of Motorsport, because for Sandy Stuvik, he would have learnt a lot from managing those tyres to come through and take the victory. Yarin Stern, I'd imagine when he watches the tape of today's race back tonight and in the weeks to come, may well feel that this is one that got away from him. He had the pace in the car, he just couldn't quite craft the opening to really challenge the tyre driver.
Possibly. I believe Yarin's got a little bit less experience than Sandy, so hopefully he's pleased with second. You mentioned three of the Deviota cars altogether down the back, but Stern in a Deviota car at the front suggests to me that the team are maybe running some differing strategies, and I think what we saw out there today was people on different strategies, whether they're on used wet tyres, whether they're on new wet tyres, whether they're on low downforce, whether they're on more of a wet weather high downforce. So I'm not sure that we necessarily saw the quickest driver winning the race, but he had the best package and he did the best job, so credit to him.
And we saw in last year's European F3 Open that the results at the first meeting of the year didn't actually really give us an indication as to who would come through and take the title, because the eventual championship winner, Nicolo Schiro, never made it past the first corner in the first race of last season. But for now, Sandy Stuvik can be very happy as we take another look at the highlights from the race. And yes, Nelson Mason getting away poorly from pole position, then Roberto La Rocca and Urrutia coming together, and Santiago Urrutia, Nelson Mason making contact into the wall. And for Urrutia in particular, this is immensely frustrating. We'll talk about the championship favourites in a few moments' time, but he has been pointed out as somebody who could really challenge this year, and he's had 2 crashes this weekend and no points. So the race got underway in fast and frantic fashion, with battling throughout the pack, and taking the early advantage, it was Spencer Pigot. Roberto La Rocca was also in the running, and he and Vicky Piria had a good scrap for third position in the early stages. Actually, Piria was able to poach her way through, as Cameron Twynham had a frustrating day, yesterday's Copper class winner. having everything go wrong. Roberto the Rocker then slipped down the pack, got involved in some frenetic battling, first of all with Alexander Toril, and then Lorenzo Paggi, led to Paggi and the Rocker's retirement. The battle for the Copper class lead was fantastic. It was Lorenzo Paggi who had the early advantage, with Liam Venter and Nicholas Pola chasing him. This was the moment then that took Lorenzo Paggi out of the race, trying to move ahead of Roberto the Rocker. 2 cars, less than 2 cars, with contact, broken suspension and retirement for the pair of them. All the while, though, Sandy Stuvik had moved into the lead of the race as the Campos Racing cars charged up the field. Valeria Carballo was the fastest car on the track before she did that, and slipped down the order, but Sandy Stuvik then, despite the late charge from Yarin Stern, came through and took the win. His first victory of the year in the European F3 Open. Nelson Mason having claimed victory yesterday, but of course, as we saw, having gone no further than about 200 metres into today's race. Delight for the RP Motorsport team, their man Sandy Stuvik. And Stuvik overjoyed with his result as drivers take their place on the rostrum. So Vicky Piria in 3rd, Yarin Stern 2nd, race winner Sandy Stuvik, and the winning team RP Motorsport, as we pause for the national anthems. Round of applause then on the rostrum for Sandy Stuvik, Yarin Stern and Vicky Piria. Stuvik utterly overjoyed with that, celebrating with the Thai flag on the top step of the podium.
Juste avant les trophées pour les 3 premiers, et ensuite nous allons enchaîner sur le châssis F308.
Presentation of, first of all, the 3rd place trophy to Vicky Piria, 2nd place trophy to Yarin Stern, and then the spoils of victory to Sandy Stuvik.
Allez, les trophées également.
Who hoists the trophy up on the rostrum. Huge round of applause from the RP Motorsport team down in the pit lane, and they'll also be celebrating as they are the winning team as well for today. Well, after the hard work of the weekend, they'll now be able to enjoy celebrations with the champagne. They've then got a 2-week break before, of course, we reconvene in Portimao in a couple of weeks' time. A more different circuit from Paul Ricard you couldn't really ask for, whereas Paul Ricard has got the long straights and technical sections. At Portimao, it's all mid-speed corners and undulations, so we will very much look forward to that in a couple of weeks' time. Of course, both races we will have full and live. Also have, after the podium for the top 3 in the race overall, the podium for the GTS cars, where it has been, or the Copper class cars rather, where it has been a dominant weekend for Team Westech, as we take the opportunity to admire super slow motion shots of the top 3 in the race overall. Yarin Stern took the fight all the way to Sandy Stuvik, but he couldn't quite overhaul the Thai driver, who was quite clearly struggling with degrading tyres as the race progressed. Yes, you can see there in that slow motion shot just how worn those wet tyres were looking by the latter stages of the race. There is Liam Venter, the winner of the Copper class for the Dallara F308 chassis. So first of all, in 3rd place was Richard Gonda. From the back of the grid, remarkable performance. In 2nd position, the German driver Nicholas Pola. And then our winner in the Copper class, Liam Venter. Super drive from Liam. who was right in the thick of the action as well, and to finish 8th in the race overall in such conditions, remarkable. The winning team in the copper class was Westech. South African national anthem then rings out at Paul Ricard as the presentation of the copper class trophies gets underway, which in turn pretty much brings us to the end of the opening weekend of the season for the European F3 Open. We will be back in a fortnight's time where hopefully the racing will be as entertaining and as lively as it has been this weekend here at Paul Ricard. But in the meantime, from myself, Ben Evans, it's time to say goodbye, and we will look forward to your company in a fortnight's time in Portugal and the Portimao circuit on the Algarve. Until then, let's enjoy the celebrations of Paul Ricard.
Et dans quelques instants, nous allons enchaîner avec la dernière course